Good morning. Good morning. Oh, Lord, it's going to be like that today. Okay, so before I start, and I've been given 10 minutes, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the organization, but I'm going to talk about SETI too, so I just guarantee you I won't be 10 minutes. But I do want to mention a couple of things, because General Zabel mentioned this, and Ms. Jones and Ms. Brisbane talking about the new way of doing business too. And one of the things that I try to do and instill in the organization is the idea of how do we change the culture of working with our partners and not just do this government handoff in terms of just handing off a draft document, handing off a draft PWS, and then at some point in time later we are issuing the final statements and documents and just waiting for questions and all that stuff. I want this engagement to be more proactive to the extent that it can be legally, but my focus is really as we look at these larger contracts as well as we look at these larger enterprise initiatives, that it has to be a two-way street in the dialogue, because we don't tend to be the experts in everything, and you guys, again, why we have you here is you are the experts in a lot of the areas. The other thing that a gentleman over here made a comment saying having problems getting into the organization. We talk about this every year. I've been doing this for a long time, and I know sometimes it's tough to get into the seniors, and I try to do my best. I mean, my executive assistant, we go twice a week going over the list of people who want to come on in and all stuff. I would ask that, I'm not the sole knowledge of everything sitting in the Development and Business Center, but if what I try to do is I look at your statements of what you want to talk about, and I try to direct it to somebody who could probably be of value to you in terms of answering the questions, knowing what the issues are, and so I will continue to do that. I welcome seeing you. I welcome all of you coming in to visit and talk about your capabilities and all that stuff, especially if they are enterprise-wide. And where I can help lean you toward the right person, or at least kind of give you some guidance on what our thought process is in the agency. So I'll do that. But secondly, I know General Zabel made a comment about talking to Ms. Jones at the small business level when you want to come on in and get that entry into DISA. I've also established under the organization, and I'll talk a little bit about more, but an industry engagement cell, which is the intent is not only to have an understanding of who's coming in and what they want to talk about, but capturing that data so that we know who are the industry folks that are trying to get in, they're having challenges, and we can try to be proactive in understanding it. So I've established an industry engagement cell, primarily focused right now on supporting the director and the engagements that he has across, throughout the year, which you obviously know is quite a bit. But I want to try to do that at the senior level too, so you guys have an opportunity to an entree into a senior, and we'll work that with those seniors. So bottom line, I wanted to make sure that you guys had that visibility. So with that, let's talk about I guess I got to do it, right? I keep forgetting. Okay. So we talked about, General Zabel made a comment about on January 15, 2015, we reorganized. And kind of it was a big shift in how we thought about, from an organizational perspective, how we do business. And if I can, I'll break it into really a simple, a simple reason why we did it, but then I'm going to show you some of the changes that we did since then that kind of built more efficiency into the organization. As you know, we broke it down into a life cycle model, if you think about it from that perspective, where you have the requirements and you have the initial engagements with our mission partners and talking about what is it that they need from DISA, either what's an existing capability or what's a new capability. And then you walk through that whole life cycle process for something that is actually deemed a new requirement, going through the due diligence of technical feasibility and business case analysis, determination whether it should be a program that we can support, there's enough demand signal, and then hand it off to a program manager or a PEO to execute, and then following that, rolling it into the appropriate testing and both development, test, pre-production, and then of course handing off to full deployment. So if you think about my organization, Development Business, it is everything to that what I would call the full deployment. So all that due diligence for new programs goes through that. So if you look at the far left, I have a mission partner engagement office headed by Colonel Brad Barnhart. he is the face to DISA. From our mission partners, he is the face to DISA. So when a mission partner has issues, one is I want to talk to somebody about getting a new unclassified mobile device, or I want to get DEE access, or I want to be able to, I have issues associated with my network, a VPN, a layer 3 VPN implementation. They go through Colonel Barnhart's team as that engagement. They are the ones who capture the information and try to find the right source. The goal here being that you don't have to carry a Rolodex of DISA people. So you don't have to roll that Rolodex and find out, okay, well, who's the networking guy I got to call, or who's the computing guy I have to call. He can help you do that. Well, the mission partner will help you do that. If it's a new requirement, if a COCOM or a mission partner comes in and says, hey, I have a new idea, I think there's something, you should think about doing this. Maybe you should do records management and email, or maybe you should do a different way of cyber analytics. I have an analytics that I want you to implement into the whole big data platform. They come in through the requirements office. The requirements office is one of the new organizations we established that focuses on taking in these requirements and doing that due diligence I talked about. The technical feasibility, the business case analysis, and they don't actually do it themselves. They're the kind of the sponsor of it and make sure that we bring the right people in to do that work. And so the requirements analysis office is that entree into bringing in new capability into the agency. They're also for lack of a better term, the secretariat to our Service Portfolio Council, which is at the senior level, the determination of if we're going to do new work for somebody or if a new customer comes in with requirements. Strategic Communications Office is exactly what it is. It's how we get the message out to everybody. Not only it's the way we provide strategic messaging on what we've done, what are some of the capabilities we have, but it's also the vehicle that manages all our social networking to get the message out to all you guys on, oh, this is the latest STIG that we developed, or this is what, where General Lynn's his priorities are still focused and what we've accomplished to date on those. And so when you look at the DISA social media vehicles, Facebook, Twitter, and all those other ones, you'll see that they manage that. They also manage, how we give the message out within our own personal to the DoD community, the strategic message, or even answering queries from and writing queries on behalf of our program managers and senior staff back to questions from DoD or even congressional answers and all that stuff. So focus on getting the message out, also being a repository of understanding of all those strategic messages, so we can go back and do the due diligence and say, well, what did we say a year ago on mobility? Are we still on track to say that, or do we have to refine that statement based on change in direction and all that stuff? New organization shift in the last 6 months. I used to have an engineering organization focused on not only enterprise architecture and standards engineering, but we also did the more tactical engineering from modeling and simulation and real more tactical design engineering. We've split that. More aligned toward the organization. Again, we're on the left side. I've got that standards. I've got that economic analysis component, but I also have innovation. That's why we call it innovation system engineering and architecture. I've picked up an innovation cell in there that, again, as we start thinking about how DISA is going to try to bring in new innovation, they're going to be that group that's going to kind of sponsor that and look across and kind of similar to what we do with RAO, how do you get the right stakeholders involved on new innovation opportunities? The right side, or the operations side of the organization, has picked up the more tactical modeling and simulation and design engineering, so they can be more reactive to day-to-day changes to their network, day-to-day changes to computing. So a little shift there. Now, the big elephants in the room here are the next three actually. The latest change this year was like General Zabel talked about, the change to portfolio management, and with that we established the new Cyber Development Directorate, headed by Mr. John Hickey, who is the senior executive under that program. He has PEOs that will focus on cyber initiatives, as well as network operations and engineering associated with those areas. Under services development, headed by Captain Al Holzlander, that's where the business, what I would call the face to the mission partner, those systems that we develop so that the mission partner has, capability in front of him, from unified capabilities to, defense collaboration services to coalition services, to even the business systems that we do internally. He's got that responsibility. And you're going to, by the way, you will hear all these, the portfolio managers talk a little bit more detail on that. And finally, I have to join Interoperability Test Command, and I'll talk a little bit about some of the changes we're doing in that area. I've kind of talked right into my second slide, but if I can go to the next slide. Oh, that's me again. They keep forgetting that I have this little button. All right, so what are my priorities? What are our priorities? And so again, they're not priorities in my vacuum. They align to the agency's priorities. What does the boss want? What does the boss want to take DISA in the next steps? And so if you think about it, it's this, and some of these fit nicely into portfolios. Some of these fit nicely into capability supporting portfolios. So enterprise services. You'll hear today about our next generation of unified capabilities on DIOS, which is, trying to get simplicity into to the department users on getting that again, front-end capabilities, from collaboration to chat to enterprise email to all these capabilities that the mission partner needs. The integration of analytics into our cyberspace so that we can make more decisions more effectively and more seamlessly based on all the data that's happening and captured across the network for defensive cyber operations. Expanding cloud into both expanding cloud to include our ERPs, enterprise resource planning efforts. We are really working hard, and you'll hear that today from the cloud guys on what we're doing in terms of, like General Zavo said, extending capability or building capability to support folks who want to extend into the commercial cloud, as well as building our own extensions beyond where MilCloud 1.0 inside our own DODIN. And so you'll hear a little bit about more of that, but that's a big effort. And I failed to put in this slide, which shame on me, because it's probably the general's number one priority, is mobility. From enterprise services, extending mobility beyond what we do currently have on the unclassified, but extending more to the classified environments, and you'll hear more from that from the PM. Cybersecurity, again, not repeating everything I said before, but building that defendable network, across the DOTA, and that's looking at all three tiers from perimeter all the way to regional to that end user or that endpoint security solution that all complements each other so that we have a defensible network across the Department of Defense information network. Coalition and C2, really some key big muscle movements in terms of providing capability to the warfighter for command and control. With the modernization of GCCSJ, moving it to a mobile-enabled capability, or actually a cloud-enabled capability, what was once a single one shop for every COCOM and every end user, now building it to a cloud-based technology, sunsetting some of the legacy systems. And then, of course, moving toward this whole virtual data center construct from a VDC perspective for coalition. Business systems, like I said, we actually have under my organization the back-end business system modernization too. From our current implementations of the new financial systems that are going to support the working capital fund for enterprise contracts as well as telecommunications, to looking at how we do CRM better. How do we do customer relationship management? How do we look at the mission partner engagement, to the provisioning, to the back-end business systems? How do we build this seamless capability? We have over 10 systems, actually it's, I think 12 systems that do combinations of all that across the enterprise, and we got to do it smartly. How do we do it with common best business practices using ERP technologies? And then finally, the IT testing services, continuing the work that we're doing in JITC from an interoperability perspective and a ATO perspective. I'm sorry, an authorizing testing executive, but also building the capability so that we can extend, like General Zabel said, our testing for their program managers so they can actually build, develop, test, and pre-production on a network that exists in the production world. So we're looking at building out this DODIN lab in our network, in our facilities, so that they emulate what is exactly out there, so that we are not kind of like taking a big old guess on what it's going to do from a capacity perspective, a performance perspective, as we field capability. So that's a big effort that we're doing with JITC in terms of building that construct, that governance and process. So that's kind of where we are in DBC. A lot of words, but I think there's a lot of good stuff going on. Real good cohesion that we're trying to build as we move to this new organizational construct. So with that, if you don't mind, I will turn to some of the, just a couple of executive level or senior level efforts that I'll talk about, then we'll hand it off to some of the portfolio managers. And the first slide is, now I am pushing the button this time, but there we go. Server virtualization, JLA, and the Cisco joint JLA follow-on. So the server virtualization, as you know, we went through a large contractual effort a while ago on that, but this is really to procure the proprietary brand name, commercial off-the-shelf, virtualization capability and infrastructure to include primarily for the licensing and maintenance of our existing virtualized network, and that's a key point of this. This was a revamp from the previous ELA that had some challenges with it and we pulled back, but this was more narrowly focused on our department's existing server infrastructure and our existing virtualization environment. So it is supporting just the maintenance and licensing of our existing server virtualization network. Our targeted award for this, again, is fourth quarter 17. As you can see, we're looking at either GSA FSS or an ESI contract associated with this. Our request for quotes is going to be released second quarter of 17. The Cisco one, farther down the road, but I wanted to make sure that you guys had situation awareness. Again, this is going to be another focused JLA, primarily supporting the Cisco maintenance that exists across the enterprise. Again, this contract that we currently have with Cisco expires in June of 19, so we're going to start the work diligently starting later this year and then work through next year to get that JLA awarded. The planning starts probably third or fourth quarter of next year. So, all right, here comes the one that everybody is waiting for, right? Deep breath. SETI. All right. So let me, if I can, first of all, and I apologize, I meant to do this, I want to introduce the PMs for each of these programs. So when you do have that more technical question, that more question that I can't answer, I want you to know the face. Is Bridget here? There's Bridget. Bridget is our JLA PM, so she owns all the the JLAs in our agency. Oh, and by the way, and I apologize to mention, I know we have two JLAs that we're focused heavily on. We are looking at others that make sense. I know we've had dialogue with some of our vendor communities on whether we should consider their application, their capabilities as part of a JLA, and it's under Bridget that is responsible for determining that. And so so it's not just a closed a finite set of JLAs, but Bridget Nelson is our key PM for both of those. Thank you, Bridget. The next one is SETI. So SETI is, the PM is Chris Riley. See him? Remember that face? So SETI is a new vehicle for us. You know, it's going to be rooted on innovation. Key point. This is to look at the new technologies, the new way of doing business, new system engineering. It's going to be looking at complex IT engineering requirements. It's intended to help take us to that next level of capabilities that we think the department requires. And so this is going to be a large engineering contract focused again on innovation, but I'll talk about some of the key areas of this. It is going to be it's a $7.5 billion ceiling IDIQ contract, and I'll talk about the high levels first. It's going to be a full and open with a small business attached, and I think I can say the numbers right, Chris. How many? Planning on 20 small business and 10 large business as part of this acquisition. We will be putting out a draft RFP by the end of December for you guys to peruse during your holiday season, and then follow that with an industry day. So that you can, have that list of questions for us to answer and all that stuff. But I will tell you, this is one of those ones as an example of how we've tried to be forward thinking and making sure that you knew what was going on. We've had 3 RFIs on the SETI contract in the last 2 years. We've pushed out the PWS and got great comments from you guys. We've had one-on-ones. We've got great comments on you all. So this, this helped change the way we're doing the contract. We've actually changed the PWS based on the dialogues that we've had on this. So, and in fact, the reason why what's important about SETI is that your dialogue, the communication that we've had with you guys has actually had a shift in how we think about the task areas that we're going to be evaluating against. So if you think about the task areas, we're going to have 7 different task areas or functional task areas that will be part of the SDLC for evaluating the proposals. System engineering being one of them, design analysis being another, systems architecture, software development, systems integration, test and evaluation, deployment and lifecycle engineering, and a special one that's focused on special engineering requirements that kind of adds out beyond just that fundamental SDLC, but focuses on specific capabilities like networking, like satellite, like spectrum, cognitive computing, and mobility, to include mobility. So this is going to move us to more of a different way of thinking of how we do engineering. Let's see. It will be an IDIQ contract, like I said. Prime contractors will include a combination of large and small businesses. We recommend and we encourage teaming throughout this contract, because I think nobody can solve, be one-all for this, and so we really think that's the way to do it. So. Again, draft RFP out in the street by the end of December. Industry day, first or second quarter of this next year, calendar year, actually second quarter fiscal year, and then with an anticipation of, right now the schedule shows a second quarter 18 award, but we are going to do our best to see how much we can push to the left on that, but I will only quote a second quarter, because Chris will get mad at me. Award, but we're gonna work hard to try to move that to the left as we get, and that will be based on the proposals and how many, all that kind of stuff. So that's where we are. And again, I wanted to point out Chris, because I know you'll have far more detailed questions on where we're going. I anticipate the more detailed ones after we put the draft RFP on the street at the end of December. The final one, oh, did I push the button? Sorry. The final one is a new contract that we're putting out in place right now. It's called Agency Program Support. When I picked up the responsibility for the program managers in the 2 large PEO, the large focus areas, both in services and cyber, we recognized that we had multiple program management, project management contracts across the board. So from an efficiencies perspective, we're looking at how do we get to a consolidated project management contract. And if you'll just give me 1 second, I'll give you the details behind all that. So this contract is going to be focused on a suite of project management areas to include contract acquisition support, asset management support, continuity management, financial management, and information resource management. So it's going to be the whole suite of capabilities that would be required from a PMO office to provide that day-to-day capabilities. It will be a totally small business set-aside award. It has a ceiling of, we're projecting $450 million. RFP will be released in the second quarter, this coming second quarter, and then award hopefully by the third quarter of this coming year. We anticipate this is going to be an exciting contract too. And Freddie Hensel, where's Freddie? There he is. He is the PM for this contract. So if you have questions, please reach out to Freddie on that. So that kind of encompasses the large initiatives we have. I will now stand by for questions before we hand it off to some of the portfolio managers. No? Oh, I have 2 coming. Yes.
Steve Goldsby with Integrated Computer Solutions.
Hi, Steve.
Hey, Mr. Rivera. Regarding SETI and the small business tracks, it's a pretty heavy lift, even if you cut out Spectrum and SATCOM. What are your considerations regarding either pools or making it to where you can get a viable small business awardee list out of this?
Repeat the question for me, would you please? I saw it.
Given the broad scope and how the heavy technical nature, have you made considerations regarding limiting to pools, for instance, to where small businesses can say, hey, I'm going to go after these task areas, or there'll be 3 pools and you can kind of pick which ones you want?
So let me see if I can help you on that one. So that was when we first started this. We had these different technology areas, and there was a lot of questions regarding that. Again, like we talked about the performance areas, it's more aligned toward that software development lifecycle. If you are a small business that your specialty, your expertise is in one functional area, let's say you're an analytics specialist or you're a mobility specialist, it's your responsibility to define how you are a specialist in that area across the SDLC. Not necessarily I have to solve all these problems for everything, and therefore I got to pull everybody else that I don't have familiarity with. It's your focus on that. So I'm not going to say we will limit you because you're only a technical expert in one functional area, because I think that would diminish the whole setting. We want experts who know their business area, and it's incumbent on you to prove how you know your business area through that lifecycle development process, how you've proven that you are the leader, even in the small business perspective, of that capability. Does that make sense?
It does. Thank you.
Good.
Thank you, Mr. Rivera. That's all the time we have for questions.
Come see me, guys. Sorry about that. God, Jim. Thank you very much, everybody.